we're up and running. And yeah, we'll okay, just a little bit there. There we go. Yeah, hey everybody, back again. I know it's been I went a long time without doing any of these streams and without doing any of these videos, and now I'm back to doing them on a regular basis. I'm actually going to be trying to do 2 or 3 a week. Kind of depends on whatever's going on. If there's something interesting happening in the world of synthesizers, which there's going to be a lot of coming up for the next few weeks. I'm going to be going to Superbooth in a couple weeks, so get a chance to see all of the new gear that's coming out, all of the new synths and modules and all that kind of stuff. It's a great opportunity where we can all kind of play around with stuff and actually get to use things, which, as you all know, if you've watched this chat a little bit, is kind of the important thing for me, is actually using this stuff and how we use this stuff. So, yeah, so let's see here. Quite a lot of signal noise on my end. Let's see here. Let's see what I can do to fix that. Just make sure that everything's connected correctly. And how's that? Is that a little better if I bring the mic down just a little bit? Let me know how the sound goes, because I do think that this mic, it's a lab mic, and I do think that it generates a little bit of extra sound, so let me know what you hear there. And let me play a little music here and see. Still there. Okay. Let me just check my sound settings really quick. All right. I bet that fixed it. Let me know if that fixes it, and we will get started. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's not noise floor, it's static. I know what it was. The software that I use for, oh, it's worse. Okay, let's see. How is that? How's that sound? All right. Still audible sound. Good, no, never mind. All right. Still audible sound. Let's see. Always a technical problem. Sorry about this, everybody. Let's see if we can make this better. What if I unplug that? Let's see if that helps out. Make this better. What if I unplug that? Let's see if that helps out. Not at all. Let's see here. All right. Yeah. All right. Well, let me know how it is right now. Sorry about the bad sound quality. I'll try to fix that for next time. See what we can do here. It won't affect too bad what we're going to do. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to be professionally recording and releasing what we're doing here. I know it's a little annoying. Apologize for that. But let's see if we can do something a little bit here. Yeah, do something a little bit better. Is that sounding any better like that? Just let me know in the chat. So basically what the plan is, hi again everybody, sorry for all the technical difficulties. So what the plan for today is that I wanted to talk a little bit about the differences and the similarities between the Elektron boxes, the Elektron sequencer and the Oxi One sequencer. I get asked all the time why I use both and how I use both, because if you've watched this channel at all, you'll know that I use the Oxi One sequencer extensively, and I use it with Elektron boxes often to sequence the Elektron box. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, was how they're similar, how they're different, and what each of them does really, really well, and why I use them. And then we can talk a little bit later on as well about the new stuff that's come out in the Elektron sequencers, particularly with the update to the Analog Rhythm Mark II, well, Mark I and Mark II, and with the Digitakt 2 that's just come out, and how those sequencers are different or similar, or what they've changed. So we'll talk about that as we kind of go along just a little bit. But thanks very much for everybody for showing up. I do appreciate it. And yeah, so let's jump right in and talk a little bit about this. So similarities, how are these sequencers the same? Well, depending on how you use them, I use the Oxi One sequencer more often in what's called multi-mode than anything else. And that in multi-mode, there's 4 sequencers in the Oxi One. If you look over here, 1 through 4. Here, I'll switch the view so you can see what we're talking about here. So there's 4 sequencers here, 1 through 4. Each one of those sequencers can be a different kind of sequencer. So I have them all set up right now as what's called multi-mode sequencers. And that means that each of them is an 8-track sequencer. So each one of these lines is basically the same as these 16 steps on the Elektron. So you've got 16 steps here, you got 16 steps here. So the reason I have it set up that way is because that's kind of how my head works. And so I like to use the gear in that same way. And but there's a lot of different types of sequencers in the Oxi One, and there's a lot of people out there that are using them in super cool ways. I use them in very basic ways because I like to have things as simple as possible when I'm performing, because since I'm improvising, I don't want to have too many technical issues. As you see, those happen all the time. But yeah, so what are the biggest differences between them? And I would say there's one major difference that differentiates between the two of them more so than anything else. So there's a ton of differences, but the biggest one is that with the Elektron sequencer, the real key to the Elektron sequencer is what's called parameter locking, if you're used to the Elektron workflow. Meaning that if I've got a kick drum like this, right? So I've got a kick drum 4 on the floor. I can hold down a step and I can change parameters and they'll be locked to that step, very much like in a tracker like the Dirty Wave M8 or the Poly-In tracker. So if I wanted to go ahead and make this second step right here have a ton of reverb, I can go to the amp page and then I can make it delay as well. And all that delay is coming on this and all that reverb is coming on this. So those are basically locked to that, those parameters are locked to that step. Can zero those out again. So the Elektron sequencers, why they're so strong is because they're built into machines that have sound sources. So whether that's a sampler in the case of the Digitact or the Octatrack or the Digitact 2, or it's a synth in the case of the Digatone or the Analog 4 or the Syntact, any of those, all those parameters of those synthesizers and those samplers can be locked to the steps. Now, that's key when you're talking about doing things, when you're talking about changing your sound design as part of your sequence that you're doing. So you can add those things like you saw, you can add in, effects to a certain step or a certain part or whatever. And you can't do that with the Oxi One in a very simple way. You can, because you can set it up to send CC messages to a synth. Then you have to know which parameters you want to lock. You have to attach that CC message to the parameter and then do things that way. So it gets clunky. Whereas these, it's very direct and very quick and very immediate. You can go right in, you can lock those things to the steps, and it makes it so that you can do all kinds of cool stuff with the sound design without having to have different sounds or without having to have multiple synths or things like that. As an example, with the Digitact, one of the things that it's really known for, and actually a lot of these machines, is that you could use just one track to do drums, and you can put the kick on the kick steps, and then on the off steps, you could parameter lock a, let's see, like an open hat. So I can parameter lock, let's see here. Yeah, an open hat. So now I've got kicks on these steps and I've parameter locked open hats on these steps. So now if I play it, and I closed it down so much. And then you also have to change up things like filters and stuff. But anyway, the idea is that you can lock certain things to certain steps, whether it's an effect, whether it's a parameter of the sound engine, like tuning for notes or things like that. Now you can do notes because you're sending that from the Oxi, which gets us into what is really unique with the Oxi One that a lot of the other machines don't do. Now with the Oxi One, it's really great for generating things live on the fly, or generating ideas if you're not doing stuff live on the fly. So let's go, for example, to, let's just take this. This is going to the Oxi Choral. So this 8-step sequencer right here is sequencing via MIDI the 8 voices of the Oxi Choral. So each one of the voices is acting like a monosynth, and each one of these lanes is a different sequencer for a different one of those monosynths. So now, I'll turn this off so you can hear this better. So you can see these 3 pink steps right here. I don't know if you can see the pink. Yeah, you can. These 3 steps are what's playing right now on the Oxi. Okay. So if I wanted to just clear those out, I can go in and I can go to a random note generator and I can set some parameters here. I can say, okay, I want the density to be anywhere from 1 to 100%. So let's put it at, let's say 75%. So that means it's gonna put a note on 75% of the steps in this 16-step pattern. And you can do this all the way out to 128 steps if you want. No, sorry, out to 64 steps. No, you can do 128, sorry, on this. But I'm just doing it on 16 so you can see kind of everything that's going on. So with this, if I was to do density of 75%, I can do how random do I want it to be, again, from 1 to 100%. And what the randomness is it's going to give you a, how likely is the note to repeat on the same note or randomly go to another note. And then the next one is the range. And the range is how many notes up or down from the root note that you've set that you want it to go. So let's say we want it to go, let's see, plus or minus 3. So from that root note, which is I think E2 on this one, it can possibly go up 3 or down 3 within kind of the scale that we've set. So it'll put a note on 75% of the steps. It'll be slightly random, so let's do like 25%. I don't know. We can mess around with this, and then it has the range to go plus 3 or minus 3. So right now, just put a kick here so you can hear that we've got something in the background. If I just press the button here, this will randomly generate those notes based on that pattern. Right, and that's generating notes that are going into the choral. So I can then modify the synthesizer on the synthesizer. Now, let's say I don't want that many notes. I can go back down to, let's say, whatever, 65 or 60% of the notes, and I can hit this again, and if you watch, it'll regenerate a new pattern, and it'll have new note values, and it'll have a new pattern that it's generated. Right? So you're getting, and let's say you don't like that pattern, you can just generate a new one. Or you can generate a new one. And say, wait, no, I like the one 2 steps before more, so I can go back 2 patterns. And that takes me back to where I was before. So a few things about this. So obviously you have control over the density, the randomness, and the range of those notes that you're generating. But the real important thing that you have control over is the key. So I've set the root note of this on E2, and it's on the Phrygian scale. If you've watched this, you know I have a thing for Phrygian E. I like that scale. I like the way that it sounds. So what's cool about this is that now every pattern that I generate, whatever I change up with those parameters within there, all of those, the patterns that it generates are all gonna be within Phrygian E. Now, the octatrack in the arpeggiator mode has the ability to lock in a key. The digitact, the digitone, and the digitact 2 all have the ability, and the syntact have the ability to lock in a key to the keyboard and the keyboard fold, but not generate random notes in key. None of them can do that. And so because of that, I tend to use the Elektron sequencer for things that are sound design based, and I tend to use the Oxi One for things that are more melodic and more note and rhythm based. Now, that's one of the main differences. Going along with the Oxi One, that idea of it being melodic, and that's what's causing the reason why I use it so much. It also will, as you can see, you've got undo and redo. It's easy to regenerate those notes so that you can always come up with something and do it in key. But it also does rhythms in really interesting ways. So it's generating random rhythms right now. You know, it's like I said, you've got the 60% of the steps, but it's a random 60%. Oh, noise is gone. Cool. It was, who was that? Rukubites said it sounded like USB noise. I just unplugged one of my USB cables and it went away. So it's this cable for those of you who know. So anyway, fortunately, let's talk about another thing that's cool about the Oxi One. It's battery powered. That cable was the cable that was powering the Oxi One and charging it, but I just unplugged it to get rid of the noise. And now we've got this. So thanks very much. You're awesome. I appreciate you troubleshooting me over the internets. So very cool. Anyway, so back on the note generation. So right now we're generating random. So it's going to put down a random 60% of the notes in that 16-step sequence. But you can get more control by using the Ukian Sequencer, which up until recently was just a function of this and not the Elektron boxes. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute, because the Ukian sequencers in this and the analog rhythm and now the Digitakt 2 are very different how they work. So with the Oxi One, what happens when you have a Ukian sequence? If you're not familiar with what a Ukian sequencer is, you give it some parameters again, and it will give you back some notes. The first thing that you give it is the total length of your pattern that you want it to be. So right now that total length is set to 16 steps. But if I was to shorten that down to, let's say, 12 steps, I can do that. Right now we'll start off with 16 so you can see. Then you add what's called a pulse, which is basically a trigger or a step or whatever you want to call it. You add that into your Ukian sequencer by telling it how many pulses you want. And what it will do is it will divide the total length of the step by the number of pulses that you give it. So right now we have a 16-step sequence and we have one pulse. So it's going to sound like this. So there's one pulse and it's on the one. It's always on the one, at least when you start the sequencer. If I add a second pulse, it's going to then try to divide that 16 steps into two the easiest way possible by putting one on 1 and one on 8. So if I add 2, and you see it's very even because it's 16 steps. And if I have a kick with this, right? So it sounds very even. However, if I now add a third pulse, since you can't divide 16 by 3 evenly, what it'll do is it will try to divide it as equally as it can, but it won't be able to divide it equally because there's only 16 steps to choose from. And that's where you start to get some really interesting stuff. So if you've got a sequencer with a kick in the background and you add in a third now, listen to this. Oops. So you hear how it's not quite on. You still get the one that's on each time, but the others aren't on. Now, if I go to a fourth pulse, because you can divide 16 by 4 evenly, you'll get this. Then you have your 4 on the floor kick. Then if you add a fifth, you start to get some really cool, fun things again. And then a sixth, and a seventh. So that's with 16 steps. What happens if you change up the length of the steps? Well, what it does is it will take that number of pulses that you give it, and it will still try to divide it as evenly as it can. So that's what makes this really cool. So now if we go, let's say if we go from 16 down to 12 steps, if we have one pulse on 12 steps, it'll sound like this. It sounds like almost like a slow triplet, right? 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Because that's dividing this into 12 instead of 16. Now, if we add 2 steps, it's going to be on the 1 and the 6 because you can divide 12 by 2 evenly, but those aren't evenly divided into 16. So then you come up with something else that's cool. So you hear how you get these really cool off rhythms and off times. Then if we add 3, now you can divide 12 by 3 evenly, right? So we'll put one every 4 steps. And in the 12, that makes it on the 4/4, right? And then if you put in a 4th step, you can divide 12 by 4, so you get one every 3 steps, but that doesn't line up with the 16 anymore, right? And where it gets really fun is when you have an even number of steps with an odd number of pulses, or the other way around. Anything that can't be divided evenly ends up being a lot more fun. So if we now switch this from where it's evenly divided by 4, if we change it to 5, so it's creating really cool rhythms for us. Now, this, the Digitech 1 and the Octatrack and the Digitone and the Syntact and the Analog 4 do not have Euclidean sequencers. They just added in the most recent update a Euclidean sequencer into the analog rhythm, and they added with the release of the Digitech 2, which I still haven't gotten mine yet, should be arriving in the next day or so. With the release of the Digitech 2, they just added Euclidean sequencing to the Digitech 2, which is great because now you can do this same kind of sequencing on there. Where there's a couple of ways that it's really very different still. The Euclidean sequencer in the Elektrons is really interesting the way they did it. It's actually on each track, there are 2 Euclidean sequencers, and you can set each one of them to have a different number of pulses, so you can set cool off rhythms within the same track. And then you have what's called a Boolean operator, which you can set to, it makes decisions for you based on math, which step it will play if there are any contradictions. So if they're both playing, it will play, or if they're both playing, it doesn't, kind of depending on the way that you set it up. So it really makes it very interesting. So you get a lot more very cool, interesting patterns with that, even more so than you get with this. Now, going back to the Oxi just for a second, there's another thing that's a cool function within the Oxi Euclidean sequencer, and it's also in the Elektron Euclidean sequencers, and that is the ability to rotate. So we'll go back to just our 12 steps. Actually, I'll go back to 16 just to keep it even here. So let's do 16 steps with 4. So when we start off, this will be right on with the kick drum. But what I can do is, with these Euclidean sequences, you can do what's called rotating the sequence. So it's kind of like nudging the sequence on a different sequencer. So it will rotate this through. So if I move this, it will rotate it 1 step. You notice everything moved 1 step. I can do it again. Now they're off beats. Okay. And what's interesting here is that now they're still divided by the same numbers like that, except right here, this last one, when I go 1 more step, it's going to jump back to the beginning, because what we're doing is we're rotating the pattern through the 16 steps. So now you see it's back over here. Sorry, we've got 5 now. Okay. Now we're back onto our number because it jumped back to the back. So if I move this around, you'll watch it go through. So you can rotate forward and backwards, which is very cool. So now we're doing that with 4 steps, but let's go back to our fun pattern that was 12 with 5, okay? So we've already got a cool offbeat pattern with the 12 and 5, but if I rotate this now, and I can find patterns that I like in there. And if there's something that's cool, I can stick with that one. Now, another thing that makes these sequencers very different with the, even with the Euclidean sequencing that's in the newer versions of these Elektron machines, with those ones, you can parameter lock notes. So if you want to change the note, you can parameter lock the note to the individual step within the Euclidean sequencer. What the Oxi sequencer does that's very different, and again, it's really exciting when you're trying to do randomly generated music, whether it's ambient or generative or techno or whatever you're doing, anything that really benefits from having improvised, randomly generated sounds. What you can do here is you can generate, instead of doing, remember we had our random generator that generated notes, and it generated, I should say, pitch and gate. So it generated a step, a gate, which makes which tells the instrument to turn on or turn off. That's what a gate does. And then the pitch tells it which note, which frequency to turn on or off. The Oxi can generate random gate and pitch independent from one another. So if I was to go into this same pattern right here, and I was to, here, let me find one that's a little bit more melodic here. Yeah, that one's better. All right, so we're gonna go to this one now. So I've got a blank set of notes here. If I was to go in here and I go to the random pitch, which is, you take the percentage where it was like 60–70% of the notes. If you turn that knob all the way down past 0, you get humanize, changing the order, or pitch, or invert. So the pitch one is the one that I love, because then you can still use the randomness and the range that you want to give it, and you can tell it to generate notes. So it'll generate pitch, or CV if you're a modular nerd. It'll generate that random note just by pressing this. So if I press this now, okay, now there are pitches on all of these, or on 25% of those, randomly generated in the key of Phrygian E with the root note of E2. They're already there. They're sitting there and they're waiting for a gate to open and closed. So if I was to play this now, it's not playing anything because there's no gates. I can go ahead and enter some gates, and I generate it on a really small amount of variation. But if I take these off and I move it, so you can see the pitch is there waiting for the gate until the gate shows up. Now, why that's also cool in talking about these Euclidean sequencers is now I've generated pitches, and I can, here I'm gonna generate some more dramatic ones now. Now I can go into the Euclidean sequencer, because the Euclidean sequencer is just generating a pulse. That's why it's called a pulse. It's just basically generating a gate at those different intervals. So having the note separate from the gate is something that makes this super fun to play around with. It's a great happy accident machine for generating music. The way I perform live is using this a lot. I'll generate things live and then I'll perform them, and then I'll generate something new and I'll perform it. So with this, we've got our 12 steps. Here, let's go back here. We'll do our 12 steps, and now let's add in, let's say 5 pulses again, on top of these cool notes that were left there in key, and see what that does for us. All right. Actually, it didn't do it because I changed it. So now, if I generate these notes now, and let's say I really like this pattern, or let's say, we want to change and go to a different pattern. Let's make it 7 of 12. You notice the note stayed, even though we added in more pulses. It just adds in the pulse on the bass note, on the root note. Now if I go in and I generate notes again, hit pitch again, or I can go really wild with the pitch, or I can bring it back down to. So what's really cool with this is that it gives you the opportunity to come up with a pattern that you really like, with a rhythm, with a groove that you really like, whether it's by generating it with a Euclidean sequencer, whether it's by entering in the pitch, the gate on your own, and you can come up with a pattern. And where I like to use this a lot is with bass lines. So I think this is a bass sound here, if I'm not wrong. Kind of. Let's just filter that down a bit. Okay, so now we've got kind of a bass sound. So what I can do is I can go in here and say, okay, I want to have my bass pattern be 8 steps long. And then, let's see here. Actually, there. Okay, so now we've got a pattern that's 8 steps long. In techno, I like to use 8-step repeating patterns for bass lines, just because I think it tends to be a bit more hypnotic. So if I go in and let's say I come up with a pattern that I like with notes on here, just using that root note. Okay, let's say I like this pattern and I want to keep that pattern going. But now I want to start to add some notes into that. So I can go into this random note generator part of this, and I can go to the pitch thing, and I can say, okay, I want it to stay pretty close to the root note because it's a bass line. I want to just have a little bit of movement. So I'm just going to have, and so every once in a while, it'll generate a note that's up one note in the key from the root note. And let's say I don't like that one, I can do another one. Let's try another one. So let's say that's the pattern that we like. What we're able to do now is take the rhythm and the groove that we've created that we liked separately from the notes. Now we can try out different groups of notes on top of those. And with the undo and redo, it allows us to go through some new ones and then go back if we liked something else better. One of the things that gets me a lot of times with random generation in a lot of machines is, and that includes the electrons, you can randomly generate things in here to come up with cool sounds. But if you generate something else, it's really hard to go back unless you generate and save, generate again and reload. So there's a lot of steps with it. With this one, I can just keep playing along. Let's try another one. Let's give it a little bit more range here. Kind of like that one. And I don't really like these, so now let's go back a few. Okay, I like that one. So it allows you to experiment, and you're not losing everything you did before. So you can experiment around and then go backwards to the one that you were using before. So it makes it really, really powerful, especially if you're interested in doing things like random note generation like this. So with all of that said, you might say, well, why would I just use the Oxi sequencer? Why even bother with the electrons? Just use the Oxi with other synths or other samplers or whatever. And that's where the parameter locking part of things comes in, is that what the Oxi can't do is it can't lock in those different parameters to what's going on within that particular synth engine or that sound. So if we were to go to another track here, I've got a lot of drums in here right now, so. Okay, let's use this one, it's a lot easier. So this is a pattern that is in here. Now you'll already notice that sometimes when it hits these notes, it's not playing. And you see these two are flashing and this one is not. The reason being, they have things locked to them for probability. So this one, if you hold it down, there's nothing locked to it, meaning it will play every single time. With this note, I can go in and I have it set to 33% probability, and I have the pitch going up. On this one, I have it set also to 33% probability and the pitch going up as well. But what I can do is, let's say, well, this one also has delay and reverb on it. This one doesn't, and this one doesn't either. So each one of those steps, like if I take those away, we just generate some random steps here. Take the delay and reverb off. Okay, so now we've got kind of our basis set here. So now if I want to go in and I want to parameter lock something like, well, let me cut the filter way down. Okay, so now we've got a good bass line. So now if I take the one of these notes, let me open the filter. So that's telling this to open the filter cutoff of that voice on this note. I can do the same on this note, add resonance, and then add delay. Maybe too much. So all of those things of changing those parameters, I can't do from the Oxi One easily. Like I said, you can, this will send CC messages and I can sequence those CC messages in by step. But in order to do that, I have to prepare all of those CC messages at the, before I perform. And I don't know what parameters I want to lock. And I only have a certain number of CC messages. With this, I can go through and I can change the note, the velocity, the length. I can change the tuning, I can change the play direction, I can add bit reduction, I can even change the sample if I want to. I can change the start point or the end point of the sample, I can make it loop, I can change the level, I can change the filter cutoff, the resonance, the type of filter, the amount of filter envelope, the shape of the filter envelope, any of those parameters, the amp envelope, the overdrive, delay, reverb, panning, volume, any of those things can be parameter locked to that step, which I can't do from the other sequencer. So what I tend to do a lot, like I said, is I tend to do a lot of drums and percussion using the Elektron sequencer, because that allows me to do really cool variations and really cool probabilities, which you can also do on the Oxi. You can send with probability as well. But you can't do the parameter locking of the different sound design things. So it makes it super powerful as an instrument, any of the Elektron instruments, to be able to do that using their sequencer. Using those two things together is really amazingly powerful. But the shortcomings are they won't generate random notes in key. They won't lock to key until the Digitac 2, which we'll talk about in a second. And they won't allow you to generate gate and pitch separately. So that's the big difference between the two. This is way better at parameter locking to the synths itself or the sound engines themselves, and this is way better for random generation in key and generating gate and pitch separate from one another. So long explanation for the very simple thing that they are, the very simple ways that they're different from the two different machines. Something that I did just mention, so the Digitac 2, something that we've been begging for. Personally, I've been begging for, and I know that a lot of other people out there, I know Ura has mentioned this a lot on his channel. A bunch of us have been begging for this. The ability to do kind of like what the Octatrack does in its arpeggiator mode, which is if you want to hold down a step and change the note. So like right now, I can turn the note and I can change this individual note. So here it's different. So I can change the individual note, but when I'm holding this down and changing it, even if I have the keyboard set to Phrygian E and I have the keyboard fold on and everything, when I hold this down, I can only turn that knob chromatically. So instead of being locked to key like it is in the Oxi, where if I hold down a step and I turn it, it's staying in key and it's jumping to the next note that's available that's in the key that I've set. This won't do that, the Digitac One, and neither will any of the other machines. The Octatrack does it in the arpeggiator mode, so it is possible to do that. If you're sequencing this, if you're sequencing other gear with this, you can send out MIDI to them in that way. But one cool function of the Digitac 2 that I haven't seen anybody talk about yet, and as soon as I get mine, it's going to be the first thing that I mess around with on it, is that now they've added in the ability, which I hope they do to all of the others, that once you've set a key in that in this keyboard mode, and you've set what scale you're in and what your root note is, if you then go to, if you go out of that mode and you go to then parameter lock something onto a step, if you turn the knob like normal, you're going to get your normal chromatic changes. So you can enter notes in between your scale if you want to have an accidental. But if you press down the encoder and turn it, it will jump by note, just like what the Oxi does. So it still doesn't generate random note in key, and it still doesn't generate pitch and gate separate from one another, but having that ability to quickly dial in notes just like I can on the Oxi. So like, here, we'll go back over here to the Oxi for a sec. So if I take these out and I just put them back in on the root note again, so those are all on the root note. If I press down one of these and I turn the note, any note that I turn to in that dial is going to still be in Phrygian E because that's what I have it set on. And if I go into there and I change the key at some point during my performance and I want to have the root note be different. So let's say right now, so if we go back here, if I change the root note from E2 to A2, it just transposed everything in key. And I can bring this back to E2, back to where I was before. Can't do that in the electrons. And if you change the key itself, it will change the notes to the nearest note within the key, just like it would jump as you were turning the knob. So melodically and for coming up with melodies, the Oxi One is crazy, crazy powerful. And this is only one of the sequencers, just so you know. This is the multi-sequencer, but there's, I'll go to this one. So you have mono, which means that every position is a step, but then all of these are the notes. So you can draw in patterns kind of like a piano roll. You have a poly, which is a polyphonic sequencer. You have a chord sequencer, multi-track, which is the one we're using, stochastic and matricial, which use different math functions basically to be able to come up with one of them. I can't remember which is which, but one of them will change parameters based on the note before it, based on the step before it. So you can say, if this step is whatever, I want this next one, wherever I place it, to be up 3 notes from that. Not necessarily I want it to be that note. So you can change things around in really interesting ways, and you can randomly generate a lot of stuff within those too. So makes that very, very interesting. But as I said, because there's no sound engine attached to this, there's no way to dial in easily things parameter locked to steps. So in a nutshell, that's why I use both of those and how I use both of those. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a sec, but I have to go check out the chat here because there's actually quite a few people chatting. I'm going to scroll back here and I'll avoid all of the stuff of, yeah, it sounds like crap. I know. Let's see. Coming from Elektron boxes for years, I recently tried the Oxi One after watching you do your magic. Didn't quite fit for me due to the lack of easily accessible parameter locks of Elektron. Well, that's the whole thing. That's why I use this and this, because this doesn't easily parameter lock the Elektron boxes. If what you want is parameter locking of functions within the box, do that. If what you want is random note generation and generating note and gate separately from one another in key, you need this. And if you want both, you need both. And I want both. So that's why I have both machines in my setup, and I haven't just switched totally away from one to the other. Let's see here. Oxi One and MPC One or Digitac 2. Which route to go with for my Ableton setup? Good question, because if you, again, I'll kind of go back to what I've been talking about here. Digitac 2 now is the most powerful of the Elektron boxes, at least the modern boxes. So if what you're looking for is parameter locking the sounds within, the samples within the Digitac 2, or within the machine itself, then the Digitac 2 is definitely your go-to. I would say 100% do that. If what you're looking for is something to sequence Ableton, I would no doubt go with the Oxi One, because you don't need to do all the parameter locking stuff. And if you do, you're gonna need both anyway. There's not one that will do both things. But cool thing with the Oxi One, you can just plug it in with a USB and it will control Ableton, no problem. It recognizes it. You've got multiple sequencers that you can do on multiple tracks. I actually have, if I go back over here, I actually have a second Oxi One over here, which is my studio one. And I keep that on my desk in the drawer that's underneath the desk. And when that slides out, it's connected to Ableton. And so anytime I'm doing things in the box, the Ableton sequencers, unless you dive deep down the rabbit hole of the Max for Live plugins, the Ableton sequencers are pretty lame in this day of sequencers. Like anything on this desk is better than the sequencers that you'll find in Ableton. So having something to control Ableton, I think is amazing. And the Oxi One is killer for that. The Digitac can do it as well, but again, you're going to miss out on a lot of the cool functionality of the Oxi, and you're not going to be parameter locking in Ableton anyway, because you can't parameter lock things that are outside of the box without using CC messages, which is exactly the same thing that you would do with the Oxi. So where the Elektron sequencer really shines is when you're parameter locking things that are within that particular box. That makes it really, really strong. All right, let's see here. Well, that's cool to have those detached. Yeah, it blew my mind. Let me tell you, when I first got the Oxi, the first time I realized that it did that, I was just like, it was the craziest thing. And it has totally revolutionized the way I play. The two things that have made the biggest difference for me in my live performance and that have changed dramatically the way I perform live is the performance template that EasyBot did for the Octatrack to give me the ability to do performance functions within my live set without having to use a DJ mixer. And then the Oxi One is the other one. Being able to generate CV and gate separately from one another for my modular, to control boxes, whatever. Something else, we didn't even really talk about this, but the Oxi has this thing, which, let me switch views back here and see if you can see this. I don't know if you can see, yeah, here we go, I can bring it in. So this is called the Oxi Split It's a little accessory that you can get for the Oxi. And basically what it does is you take the MIDI out from the Oxi One into the Split, and then you have multiple MIDI outs, because where most machines generate MIDI channels 1 through 16 through their output. So you've got 16 things you can do, 16 things you can control, 16 destinations it can go to. The Oxi One has 1 through 16A, 1 through 16B, and 1 through 16C. So it has 48 channels of outbound MIDI, and then the Split changes that up. So I have some of those going to the Oxi Choral, some of those going to the Dig Attack. I have some of those going to other boxes. When I used to have multiple synthesizers, like I had a Syntact and other things, I had those going to those as well. And I could control each one of those from a different place on here. And with 4 different sequencers, you can send, basically it's set up so that you can have, if you were using them all on multi-mode like I am, you could set them up so that basically sequencer 1, let's say it's 8 tracks of MIDI going somewhere, sequencer 2 going somewhere else, sequencer 3 going somewhere else, sequencer 4 going somewhere else. Or you can even divide it up, and you can say on this sequencer, I want track 1 to go out via CV to my modular, and I want track 2 to go out via MIDI to this other machine. So it's crazy flexible in how it works. All right, let's see what else we've got here. I've owned MPC One and have an Oxi, 100% get the Oxi. The Oxi in Ableton and a synth or two is unbelievable. The best purchase I made is good. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's, if I was gonna have one piece of hardware to deal with Ableton, it would be the Oxi One, because there's so much other stuff that you can do with Ableton. I mean, the Oxi One, you can use it as a keyboard, you can use it as a chord generator, you can use it to generate patterns, and it can send modulation, and it can send all kinds of stuff. So it does a ton. And then if you were gonna add, let's say you added a synth or a modular or a groovebox or an Elektron or something like that, you can just very easily just add it on and still control it from the Oxi. Another big plus with the Oxi One is that it's I can't remember who it was that told me this, but somebody was saying that since they got the Oxi One, they love the fact that every time they get a new piece of gear, they don't have to learn a new workflow. They don't have to learn a new sequencer, a new way to input stuff. And sometimes you want to. Sometimes it's cool to learn stuff, and that gives you creative new ideas. But if you want to just get into using the sounds of a new machine, and you've already got the Oxi, you can actually just take the Oxi with sounds or with sequences that you've used to sequence other gear and say, oh, well, I kind of like this bass line in my modular. Now I want to plug it into that synth over there. And you can have the same bass line, you just plug it in, and you can do that, which is another great thing about using a sequencer that's independent from the machines, because you can use it to sequence all the machines. Let's see here. They're trying to figure out a way to have pitch information from monosynth be triggered by a gate from the kick drum of the drummer I work with. So it's in pitch of the sequence, but triggered by his field instead. So you could do that with modular if you had something that would translate which there's a lot of modules that do this. They would translate audio signal to control voltage. So you could send in an audio signal and use that to trigger a control voltage going out to somebody else. So that's something that modular is very cool for. Let's see. Integrate analog 4. Yeah, I mean, you could. There's ways to do it. It would just, it's fairly complicated, but you could do it. Yeah, Oxi can't really do, well, I don't know, because, and this is something that I don't use on the Oxi, so I'm not the person to talk to about this, but I know that it does take incoming information. So like if you were, sending it information from a controller keyboard, you can put that into the Oxi through. So if you had something coming in from a trigger, that might be able to trigger something going out. I don't know. I haven't used that. Let's see here. Damn, I can see why you use that live. Yes, that's exactly why I use this live. Can't wait for them to ship my Digitac 2. Me neither. It's supposed to arrive here any day. Hopefully it will get here before I head out. I'm going to be on the road for 2 weeks with a whole bunch of gigs, and I want to take this Digitac 1 out of this spot right here and put a Digitac 2 right here. So that instead of having 8 tracks of samples, I will have 16 tracks of samples. And instead of having to use a separate machine like the Octatrack or the 1010 Black Box to time stretch things like vocals, I'll be able to do them properly using the time stretch within the Digitac 2. Being able to dial in notes, which again, I won't be doing a ton in the sequencer in here because most of that's coming from the Oxi One, but I will be able to dial in tone and things like that for percussion, which is great because if you're using things like toms, like what we were using before, if you're using a tom, it's really great because then you can tune it in and have it be kind of a groovy rhythm that's kind of like tonal percussive rather than melodic, and being able to dial that in by key and making sure these are just both set up on the same key is amazing. And if you're somebody who's not doing this in an improvised way, or you're only improvising partially and you have preset bits of songs and then you want to transition from one to the other, the Oxi can send program change information. So let's say on your next pattern, this changes from Phrygian E to C minor. You can have it send a message to the Digitac 2 to change to C minor, and then all those notes dial in C minor for that one. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do that's really very cool with it. Let's see here. We still use the rhythm. Yes, the rhythm is still my favorite piece of gear. I love it. I just love the way it plays. I love the sound is just so good. I've heard a bunch of people recently saying they don't like the sound. If you can't get that thing to sound good, you need to put some more effort into learning sound design, because it is, for me, the easiest machine I have ever had to dial in drum and percussion sounds using the synths on it. It is just endless sweet spots, which is so cool. It's very much like the Percons. Those are 2 drum machines that I really love because there's so much variety in what you can do with them, and it's so easy to make them sound good. Where a lot of other instruments, man, you feel like it's working against you, like it's trying to make sure that you can't do what you're trying to do. All right. If you guys have other questions, just chuck them in the chat to talk about some other stuff. Just really quick, a couple things for anybody who's been around for a while. You'll know that I just had a big change recently, changed jobs, started my own company, and trying to do a little bit more with the music thing. So I fired up my Patreon. So if you're interested, go over to that. It's patreon.com/Circo. And then there's also a merch store where you can get things like this cool sweatshirt with the embroidered new Circo logo that looks like this. So yeah, if you head over to the website circolive.com, you can check out that stuff as well. And if you are interested in getting an Oxi One, they shot me over a promo code, which is cool. So when you're checking out, if you like on the Oxi One website, if you use Circo Live as your promo code when you're checking out, you'll get 5% off your purchase, and I get a little affiliate bonus, which is pretty cool. So anyway, yeah, and then there's affiliate links down in the bottom of this as well. So check all that stuff out because it definitely does help. Definitely does help a ton. So. Yeah, so let's just show a little bit more about how I'm using this stuff, because now that you have a little bit of the example of what it is, I can show you a bit more about the way I perform live, which is I'll have my drums and I'll have some kind of basic drum kits set up, and I was doing kits on the Digitac 1, and obviously the Rhythm has kits, and now the Digitac 2 has kits as well, which is great, so I don't have to use them the same way. With the Digitac 1, I was basically just having each pattern was a kit. So if I wanted a new kit, I would just switch patterns because of because I'm writing a lot of the actual patterns, the actual sequences on the fly. It made it so that I could change up the sounds in kind of an easy way, and I would keep them grouped together in groups of sounds that sounded good together, and that way I would be able to change that. But the Digitakt 2, interestingly enough, they added kits into it, which I'm super excited about. Another thing they added into it, which is going to allow me to use the Digitakt in my set instead of the rhythm, is having the master overdrive or the master drive gives it a lot of power and a lot of kind of saturation harmonics, which is one of the reasons why I use the rhythm, because it makes everything kind of sound better. And so I'm looking forward to using that with the Digitakt 2 as well. Being able to have that in there. And there's a lot of stuff that the Digitakt 2 is doing better than the rhythm now too. It's got 3 LFOs per track, which is cool. It's got more tracks. The rhythm has 12 pads, but it's only 8 voices because some of them are choke groups. They share the same voice. So you really only have 8 voices on there. So it's kind of like the Digitakt 1 has been. Now with the Digitakt 2, you have 16. So it just gives you a lot more power. Yeah. So anyway, so drum wise, I tend to keep those pretty basic to start off with, and then I'll write things on the fly. So as you heard, I've got a 4 on the floor kick here, and I'll keep that. And then what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll adjust the sound during the performance. So if I want to change this up, I can change the tuning. I can add resonance to give it more of a knock at the beginning. I can take off some of the envelope depth to kind of slow it down, or I can add more envelope depth to give it more power. So again, using the Elektron boxes, you have a lot of control over the sound while you're playing live. So you don't have to have, like in a lot of machines, so somebody was asking before about the MPC. When I tried the MPC a couple years ago, the MPC Live 2, and I was like, oh, this seems really cool. It does a lot of stuff. I really want to try it. And the workflow for performing live and changing things live on the fly, whether it's MPC or Roland or any of the others, for me, it's really difficult to deal with. It's really clunky because the things aren't very immediate. With the MPC, it does so much that in order to do all that stuff, you have to have menus and menus and menus and menus of things to go through in order to get to it. Where rather than having one thing that goes deep, the way the Elektron workflow is it's got multiple shallow levels. So like if I want to adjust the trigger, I go to the trigger page, I have 8 parameters and I have 8 knobs. So everything's right there for me to use, and I can do multiple things at once. If I want to adjust the filter, I can go to the filter page and I've got the filter envelope, the type of filter, the cutoff, the resonance, the envelope amount, all of that stuff all right there immediately able to be used. So that's why I use this a lot live to change sounds rather than like, okay, new song, let's load up a new kick. I'll just say, no, I'm going to keep the same kick all night and I'm just going to keep changing it. I'm going to keep it evolving over the course of the night, and it allows for much smoother transitions. And so having that ability to modify things easily on the fly, like I get asked all the time why I don't use the TR-8S, because it's such a great drum machine and it's got those great Roland sounds. But as soon as you want to diverge from a Roland sound, so like if let's say you've got a 909 kit in there and you want to modify one of those sounds beyond the couple parameters that you get, you're going into that little tiny screen and you're going menu, 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 change one parameter, back out. Go down another menu hole, change a parameter, back out. So if you do that when you're setting up, getting everything ready for your set, you're golden. Then you don't have to do anything. Then you've got that great immediacy of having the sliders, which I love, and having the individual knobs that are mapped to certain things that you wanted to have them mapped to. But if you perform the way I do, where you're changing, you're doing a lot of sound design in the moment on the fly, I like it to be more like the modular, where everything's right there, where I can just kind of go to it and I can use it, and that's it. Like in this modular, that's the way everything's set up, is it's all designed to be used on the fly. So anyway, you know, if we go down with the kit here, so we've got our kick, then I always lay these out the same. So the second one is either a clap or a snare of some sort. Then I've got a couple of different toms. Yep, and then I've got closed hat, open hat are always here next to each other. And then these upper ones can be whatever. They can be, you know, random sounds. Yeah, so anyway, those, that's how I kind of set up my kits. So this would be drums. Then all of the synth voices, I was using the Syntact and the modular, but now that I'm going to be using the Digitact 2, voices 9 through 16 are going to be synths or sounds or samples of other synths or whatever. So I'll have kind of bass lines and melodic ability here, and then I'll still have my drum kit in my same kind of format that I had it in the past. And then obviously I have the modular setup so that this is really hands-on for anything that is bass lines, melodics, and a lot of percussive stuff, and of course effects with the Endorphins Ghost. So I'll go through this really quick just to show you a couple different things. So if we go to the Bastel Pizza, which is this guy over here on this side, I tend to use that a lot for bass lines. So let's just take these out of here. All right, if we turn this up. So obviously there's nothing on there right now, but then I can generate notes again. Ooh, I need to unmute it. And again, because I have this set to a key, as soon as I generate a pattern, it's going to put those all on the root note. So this is set in Phrygian E and it's on E4. So that's an E4 and it's just going to set. So I've got a pattern at least. So if I was to go to another instrument, let's say if I want to go to the BIA, yeah, I'll just take those off and just randomly put something else in here. Something offbeat from what that's doing. And then if I was to bring the BIA in, so you can see they already go together because this is sending out things that are in key. So if I make changes here, then I have all of these in the modular. They're all set up to go on a send through the Endorphins Ghost. So I'll turn that down. I'll just turn the Ghost up a little bit. And if you don't know, the Ghost is distortion, overdrive, reverb, delay, DJ style filter, high pass, low pass. It's got a compressor. It's got, I can't remember what else. And I have some settings that I like where I can send things through it and it just adds kind of background atmosphere, and it will automatically add that atmosphere in key because it's being sent things that are in key as well. So if I start here, this is the BIA by itself. Now if I start to send the BIA to the Ghost, And that's emphasizing where the cutoff of that high pass, low pass filter is with some resonance. If I was to change that, it almost sounds like a new synth comes in. So again, that's that sound going through the Ghost. So now, if I was to add in just my regular kick to that. Can bring in my bass again. And then because I have my drums all laid out so I know where those drums are, if I'm starting to build up this new track that we're just creating here, and I decide that I think it needs now something percussive, I can bring in one of the percussive elements. And then, so right now, you'll notice So then we can kind of start to build things up using that and knowing that they're in key because they're coming from the Oxi all in key. And then I can use the drum patterns that we have set up here and I can dial those in using the parameter locking or just using the synth control that makes it really easy to do. And then I can control the synths themselves up here. And now if we want to bring in something, let's say on the Oxi Choral, Then of course, kind of the final step of everything is we've got this all going through the Octatrack through EasyBot's template here, which I'm modifying a little bit. That's why there's some things that are changing on here. But let's say we want to start to add in some effects to do a build up before we do a breakdown again. So we're going to keep our same 16th note pattern, but just start to generate some new notes. Again, those sweep sounds is the choral going on ascend into the ghost. And then we've got our favorite over here, the Quadranted Swarm, which just made its way back into the case. Let's close that up and see what we got going there. Actually, on this one, we're just going to do some random generation. So let's go to, we can use our Phrygian. Let's do a 12 and 5 because that's a fun one. And I'll show you what that sounds like. So again, that's all just on the root note, but now if we go in and we do our random note generation, we can make something out of that. Something else we didn't talk about, which I can show you as well, is that it's possible to layer the sequencers. Here, I'll stop this so you can hear. It's possible to layer the sequencers. So if I have, for example, let's see here. So I have my open hats, simple open hat pattern there. I could also be sending to that same channel more triggers, right, from the Oxi, but I've got them muted right now on this channel. So if right now I was to, here, I'll pull this all down quieter so you can hear this. So again, if we go back to track 6, you can see pretty simple offbeat hi-hat. But now if I add in some random triggers on track 6 over here, on a randomly repeating, so it's only a 7-step pattern, so it'll keep changing, I can unmute those. So I can still keep my normal kind of 4 on the floor offbeat hats here, but now all of a sudden, I've got something that's a lot more interesting. And if I change these up, so that gives me the ability to mix up that pattern while keeping it the same here. And if I want, I can parameter lock things to these steps and then still have these ones adding in as additional notes, right? So bring this back up just a little bit. Guess I could have turned the volume down here. But you hear how that gives us, just on the open hat track, it gives us kind of an open hat and closed hat, while I still have the ability to bring in regular 16th closed hats. And then if I take it out, and that it's also worth mentioning that if you notice that they don't compete against each other, because since the digitact is monophonic, if it's got 2 notes, it will choose one of them. So if this one has a higher or lower velocity than the one that's coming from over here, it's going to pick one of those notes. So if we're listening to that, and I take this out, hear how it's giving it different, because it's the different velocities that those two have. So it gives it different sounds. So it does sound like an open and a closed hat going at the same time, but it's all on the same thing, and it's still using a very simple sequence. So that's, again, one of the reasons why I have some very simple patterns programmed on here. So you'll see like offbeat hats, you'll see 4 on the floor kicks, things that are very, very simple, that are kind of my foundational elements, you know, of a 16th note hi-hat. Those are all the foundational elements. But then when I want to start making it interesting during the performance, I'll either change something up in here in the machine, or I'll layer another sequencer on top of that sequencer, so that it gives me the ability to do a whole bunch of different things within the same machine. So yeah, so that's how I use these 2 sequencers. So let's take a look and see if there's any other questions in the chat here. When you use the Syntact, you simplified it down to just the 8 digital tracks. Did you miss the analog tracks? No, because when I was using the Syntact, I was using the analog rhythm as my drum machine. And to be honest, there's nothing that compares to the analog rhythm. The Syntact is great and it sounds really good, but it's still nothing anywhere near what the analog rhythm does. So I didn't need those analog engines at all, because I had that all taken care of by the analog rhythm. And so I was basically using the Syntakt as a multi-timbral bunch of mono synths in one machine, which is the same thing that I'm going to be using the 9 through 16 steps on the DTAG for. I'm just going to be using a sample for those sounds instead of a synth engine, just to scale things down. And it'll be samples from the rhythm, samples from the Syntakt, samples from my other synths that I have here in the studio, from the modular, from things like that. So yeah, make it easier. Let's see here. I wish there was something with the buttons and layout of the TR-8S with the synthesis of the Syntakt. Yeah, it's, we talked about this on the live stream last week, that these companies are constantly walking this line, this tightrope, between, do I make it hyper functional, powerful, it does everything under the sun, or do I make it really immediate and able to be used? So you'll find this happens a lot. When you have machines like the MPC One, like the Octatrack, like the MC707, all of those, they do so many things. Oh, the Machina Plus, same way. They do so many things in one box that there's no way to avoid a ridiculous amount of menu diving. And so I think it's kind of an impossibility to have something that will be immediate and also deep and functional. And I think that one of the reasons why I use the Elektron gear so much, and the Oxi, but really it's Elektron more than any other company out there. They've gotten really good at finding the right balance within that thing, with having super powerful machines that are immediate and ridiculously intuitive and easy to use. Now, I will take the Octatrack out of that, along with everything from its generation. So the mono machine, the machine drum, the Octatrack, all of those, they were not easy to use because Elektron hadn't learned their lesson yet. And they basically were saying, we want to make things that will do every single thing that they can possibly do, which they do. I mean, they were, for their day, the most powerful things there were. The Octatrack still to this day has no equal. But because of that, the Octatrack is ridiculously difficult to use, to learn and use. Even though it has the fundamentals of the Elektron workflow, it's so deep. And there's so many layers of things that it can do, even when you're performing. I mean, just having a MIDI track and an audio track and a recording buffer on every single track that can all be used to point to other tracks. This track can MIDI this track, which can then be recorded on this buffer on this track. Like the way that that's all kind of twisted around and able to be used is really, really, really difficult to use. So with the Octatrack, you're best off to go through all of that pain and suffering of getting things set up in advance before you perform, and set it up to have a set of parameters that are easy to use, which is why I'm using it as a performance mixer, and I'm not using it as a sequencer, a sampler, a looper, all the other things that it can do. I'm not using it for those things. I'm using it as an effects processor to process, using its effects, these other machines that are there, because having the scenes makes that really easy. The scenes, ask EasyBot, there's a reason why he's the only one who has made something that's this in-depth as this performance template, because it's a huge pain in the ass to make. And he has spent a ridiculous amount of his life making this so that we don't have to go through all the brain damage of learning all the ins and outs to get it to do this. The fact that it even does it is amazing, that you can come up with your own performance effects, that you can build yourself and you can mix and match, assign to scenes, and then have them be super easy to use by assigning it and using a crossfader. It's the end result is very great, the power that it has, but it's a pain in the ass to use. Whereas they learned their lesson on the new boxes. They learned their lesson with anything that's from the kind of Mark II range of the older ones going forward and all of the digiboxes, they learned that there's a balance between that. So when people say, oh, but the Syntag doesn't sample, oh, but the Digitag doesn't have a synth engine, oh, but the Digitone is just an FM synth, oh, but yeah, because what it does is one thing with a crazy powerful sequencer that you can parameter lock, all of that functionality to. If you wanted to be able to do that with one box that synth, sample, FM, subtractive, analog engines, digital engines, wavetable, granular, all in one machine, using this sequencer, being able to parameter lock, it would become this convoluted mess that machines like the MC707 are, that they do so much that you can't possibly get them to do it. And it's just like the Octatrack is. Fortunately, the Octatrack is really flexible in the way you set it up, so you can actually build it out to be easy to use at the end. But a lot of these machines you can't. When I use the MPC, you've got 4 knobs next to the screen. And you might go in and you might have all these different parameters. You've got to use like touch screen, button combo, use the knob, go into this menu, drop down menu, select a thing, and it just gets crazy convoluted. And these, take the Octatrack out of it, but the digiboxes, Syntag, Digitag, Digitone, are crazy easy to use. And super intuitive because they don't try to make them do too much. And if they did, and they built it all together to do one thing, no one would buy it because a few people would get it and they would be like, this is the worst thing in the world to use. I don't want this. I just want a sampler that has an amazing sequencer. Okay, cool, Digitag. I just want a sample mangler that can loop and do effects. Okay, Octatrack. I just want a multi-voice synth that's not even polyphonic. Okay, Syntag. So you've got what you want, but they don't try to make it all into one machine that does everything, because they could do it, but it would be the size of a Polybrute with twice as many buttons as a Polybrute has. Yeah, there's a method to their madness, and I, for one, as a user, I really appreciate that they've had the restraint to not try to make boxes that do everything in one box, because that way they're able to do individual boxes that do things really well. Like, for example, I no longer have a Digitone. I had one for a while, and I sold it because it wasn't for me. It wasn't. I wasn't looking for FM synthesis. I wanted more tracks than what it had, and so it wasn't for me. But there's other people that polyphony and FM synthesis is all they care about. So awesome. I mean, the Digitone is an amazing machine for that person. But don't make me suffer through a machine that included all that stuff just so I could get to the bits and parts that I want to use. So I like the fact that their system is modular, and that you can put, you could put 3 Digitags together if you wanted to have a massively powerful sample-based workflow. Or you could put, 2 Syntax and a Digitone, or you could put, one of each, or you can mix and match to whatever makes your setup the best. And for me, that's very much like a modular synth. That's very much like what we've got going on over here. I want to have more voices and less modulation, because when I play live, I modulate. I turn the knobs. I don't want to have 20 LFOs cross-modulating each other so I can just push play and stand back and let it play by itself. I want to get in there and do it. So I built that machine. I built the machine that does that is modulatable by me, and it doesn't modulate itself. And that's what I love about modular, is that it's not like a regular synth where it's like, okay, here's how this works, take it or leave it. And I think a lot of the machines that have come in the box format now, the groove box format, have kind of gone down that road. They're like, well, this is how we do this, so take it or leave it. And given that choice, I generally take the Elektron boxes more often than others, just because I definitely like the workflow. So let's see here. The Roland Menu Labyrinth. Yeah. The I was talking with a friend of mine actually last year at Superbooth, and he mentioned that, and I cracked up about this, and I say this all the time because he made me laugh. He said the Roland workflow is hostile. It's like the machine is working against you. And it sucks because they sound so good. If they could just take a lesson from Elektron and how to make them, you know, make them easy to use and still have those amazing sound engines, oh my God, it would be amazing. So the way to do that is, you know, sequence that from one of these, sequence that from an Oxi, and then you've got a good workflow with a great sound. All right, let's see here. Thank you so much for these lives and videos you make. It helps me learn and understand better. Well, that's why I do it, because when I was learning all this stuff, I couldn't find the things I wanted to learn. And so I started this channel a couple years ago, and I said since the beginning, like, the whole point is to try and make the videos that I wish that I could find when I was struggling through this stuff, so that you guys can kind of learn from mistakes that I made, and you can see how I use stuff and not say like, oh yeah, that's the way. You can see how I use stuff and go, oh, that gives me an idea. I want to try and do something different, or this way, or, you know, a different way. I don't want you to do this exact same thing. I want you to say, oh, that was cool how you put those two sequencers together. Now I'm going to do that in my, you know, deep house music that I make. Cool. That's amazing. That's awesome. So you're welcome. You said thank you. You're welcome for that. I want an Octatrack 2 with mono machine inside. Well, I mean, it's funny. Whenever anybody says that they want a machine drum or a mono machine, the reality is that the machines we have today, they just changed the names. They could have called it a machine drum Mark II, Mark III, Mark IV, and kept going with that name. But in reality, all the machines that we have today built off of all of the machines that we had in the past. I mean, there's engines in the Syntakt that sound just like they're from the SID, from the really super old Elektron machines. So they've all kind of built off of that. So what we have today is the new mono machine, is the new machine drum, is the new, and those ones still sound great for what they are, but this is the new version of it, just like the TR-8S is the new version of the 909. It's got great sounds in it, but it's today's version of that, and it kind of learned from it and grew up from there. Let's see. I think Torso T1 is also pretty good on generating pulse and gate separately, plus a lot of performance features as well. I totally agree with you. The Torso T1, I really want to mess with it. I haven't had a chance to. I played with it a little at Superbooth last year, and I really want to mess with it again because it does some really cool, unique things as well, you know, and before you know it, I'm going to have Elektron sequencers and Oxi and a Torso and all kinds of stuff to, you know, HapX and all these other sequencers, because every one of them does like a cool, unique little thing. So yeah, I want to play around with the Torso. It looks very good. I must say though that the Oxi I've really meshed with it really well. It works very much the way my brain works, and so it's kind of fit itself right into this setup very well. Let's see here. I want a Syntakt analog 4 analog rhythm, digatone, and analog heat myself. And I'm thinking, would I get a Digitac Mark II to sequence the rest of your synths in a flexible way, or would you just use the Syntakt? So if it's just to sequence other synths, I would use the Syntakt because it's exactly the same. You're not going to gain anything. The sequencers are basically the same. You know, one has 12 tracks, one has 16 tracks. So if you have 16 synths and not 12 synths, then yeah, maybe you get the Digatone too, or Digitac too. But you won't gain anything. The sequencers are the same. And as I mentioned before, now that I have the Oxi One, I would not use any of the Elektron boxes to sequence other boxes. Now, if I didn't have the Oxi One, I would definitely use them to sequence other boxes, because you can still do a lot of cool stuff with the sequencers, with the probabilities and with things like that. It's really still a very powerful sequencer. But today, with the gear that I have today, if I was going to sequence other things, it would 100% be from the Oxi One. There's no reason why. Like I said, the Elektron is really powerful if you're sequencing the Elektron. And it's more powerful than the Oxi One if you're sequencing the Elektron. But for sequencing other things, I think the Oxi One shines a little bit more. Would the Access virus fit into similar workflow, hands-on enough? Yeah, man, the thing with the virus is that it's another one of those synths that's so powerful that inevitably it's complicated. So if you spend a lot of time to get to know it and really get hands-on with it and use it really well, yeah, it would be awesome and it would fit right into a workflow like this. But if you didn't, if you were just trying to use something that was really immediate and hands-on and quick, it's going to be less quick than something like one of the Elektron boxes or modular or something like that. But sounds awesome as well. It's like, as with the roll and stuff, it sounds amazing. Let's see, I have Phantom 6, beautiful. Those are amazing. And I love the roll-in sounds. Yes, me too. But the firmware is lacking. Yeah, you can't mute solo external synth, sequence from the Phantom like you can. Yeah, that's the thing, is it always feels like whenever Roland makes something, they pour everything into making it sound so good. And then they don't have anybody actually saying, so how's this going to be used? How are we going to work with this thing? And then when you get it, you have to figure out like, oh, I got to work around. I need this other synth. I need this other machine. I need to connect to this. I need something else in order to make it work smooth. Or I need to dive super deep. And then I get kind of limited because I can't use all the functionality of the beautiful synth engines. So yeah, I'm with you. I love the roll-in sound. I just wish I wish somebody would spend some time playing with Elektron boxes and learn how they work. You know, it's funny, I've spent quite a bit of time talking with Manuel, the guy that invented the Oxi, and he codes it all himself. He designed it all himself. He's kind of a one-man show. And when he was designing the Oxi, what he did was he got a whole bunch of these other sequencers, like a Torso, like an Elektron, like a whatever, and you know, like Circlon and like you know, all these amazing sequencers, and he learned them all, and he said, okay, what does this do really well? What does this not do really well? What are the things that are clunky? Okay, can I fix that? Can I work around that? And he took all of that learning from learning how to use all of those different sequencers and built it all into the Oxi. And so one of the reasons why it is so strong is because he didn't just build it in a vacuum. He said, how can I make this better? How can I take the best of all of the best and make it into something even better and even more user-friendly and small and battery-powered and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Sorry for my dog barking if you guys can hear. Let's see, how crazy creative it would be to have the Oxi and the T1. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that would just be, if that would be creative or just overkill. I don't know. I mean, already layering the Oxi One with the Elektron sequencer, I have to do it really sparingly because really quickly it can become like this cacophony of crazy sounds. And I think the T1 would be like that if we had both. I would say that if I was going to use the T1 and the Oxi, I would use them on very separate things. And I would have certain ones that were for certain things, kind of like I have the Elektron sequencer for drums and the Oxi sequencer for melodic stuff. I would do the same. I watched Ura's video today. I don't know if you guys saw that, but he was showing the T1 with the assimilator module for his modular and showing how good the T1 is for drums and percussion. And so like if you didn't have an Elektron box that you were using for drums and percussion, the T1 would probably be pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. C, do you think the Deluge could fulfill the role of a jamming sequencer and idea generator, or would an MC707 or Oxi be better? Wow. So I've used all three of those machines, and I can tell you what I liked and disliked as a jamming and idea generator. For a very long time, before I had the Oxi One, the Deluge was my travel box. When I spent a lot of time traveling for work, and so I would be on planes, and I was like, cool, it's battery powered, it's got multiple tracks, I can have as many tracks as I want, it's all in one, it's got samples and synth, and it's got everything. Each one of those things is relatively shallow. The synths aren't the best, but they're there. The sampling isn't as easy to use, but it's there. Before it had the screen even, that was crazy hard to use. Now with the little screen, it's good, it's better. And it's definitely functional. It's harder to generate a finished product, but if you want to sketch and generate ideas, the Deluge is great. And that's what I used it for. When I was traveling, I'd be on a plane and I would sit there and I'd sketch out ideas for production. And then when I got back to the studio, I would just flip those audio tracks to MIDI and I would send them out to the synths in my studio. And be like, okay, this is a cool bass line. I kind of hate the synth that's inside the Deluge that I'm using, but I like the bass line. So then I get home and I flip that to a MIDI and I send it to my subsequent 37 because it sounds amazing. So it's like, okay, cool. I can sketch on this and use that sketch in production. Harder to do that in a kind of a performance setup because the Deluge isn't as good at randomly generating stuff as the Oxi is. Now, the reason I was doing that before I got the Oxi is because now that I have the Oxi, I use this as my idea generator when I'm traveling. So what I do is the Oxi has MIDI over USB. So I will take my phone with a cool little, let's see what I've got here. So I'll grab a synth like the Moog Model D synth in my phone, and I will flip the Oxi to Bluetooth MIDI. And so without a power cable, because it's battery powered, without a battery cable for my phone, without having to connect the two together, I can send it stuff and I can write patterns in the Oxi. And then when I get back to my studio, I can plug the Oxi into my studio and I can send those out to a synth or to a plug-in in Ableton or whatever. So it's even smaller and even more convenient because I can do it all on my phone with synths in there. And you can use AUM. I don't know if Wabbit is still on here. He was on here before. Go check out the Crazy Wabbit channel. He does some really cool stuff with the Oxi One and AUM over USB. So the same thing, if you've got AUM running on your phone or on your iPad, you can use the Oxi One to sequence it, you can write patterns, and then you can save all those patterns in the Oxi One. And then when you get back to your live rig or your production studio, you can just plug it in and just send it all out. And then you've got all those things used, and you didn't even need to bring anything with you that you didn't already have, because you're already gonna bring your phone, right? So that means the only thing that you need to bring with you is the one little piece. And again, because it's battery powered, you don't even need a cable. It's, you charge it via USB-C. So if you've got an iPad, you've already got the same charging cable. So you don't even need an extra charging cable. So it's like the ultimate easy travel machine to use that to be able to send out to other gear, but also to your phone and things like that. So yeah, very cool. So again, that's why I switched from the Deluge to the Oxi One, is because this is better to use with my other stuff and even smaller to carry with me. So once I realized that I was using the Oxi One for that thing, I sold my Deluge. Even though I loved it, it's a great machine. I highly recommend it. If you're gonna have one groove box, it's killer. It's a rare exception to the do all the things in one box and be super convoluted. However, I will say there's a lot of button combinations, and you gotta be able to read all those little things that are written next to the buttons. And so it isn't the easiest thing to use because it does so many things. But once you get into it and get jamming on it, it's cool for generating ideas, particularly melodic ideas. Let's see here. Would you ever move to a giant setup like Octave One? No, because, well, I shouldn't say no. If I was able to if I was able to demand the fees that Octave One can demand, so that I could make sure that all of my gear could be checked into Pelican cases and carried with me, and a third or half of the gear on the stage when they play is not theirs, that they brought with them. They have as part of a rider. So anything that's like mixers and things like that, unless it's, you know, a specific one that they have just for their setup, but like things like DJ mixers and even specific machines, they'll ask for those to be provided and as part of their rider. So then they don't have to carry it around. So unless I got to the point where I could do that, then no. And even then, I don't know that I would want to, because I'm not a keyboard player. I can plunk along on the keys, but I'm not very good. I'll sit there and play my polybrute and pretend like I know what I'm doing, but I'm not good enough that I'm going to be improvising live on a keyboard. But I could improvise live with synthesizers with sequencers. And I can use sequencers to generate and improvise patterns and write melodies live on the fly. So I wouldn't need to use a big setup like that. A lot of what they have is keyboards, and I just don't play keyboards. So, you know, rather than having a sub 37 on stage, I would have a sequencer and a Minotaur on stage. You can see right there, there. I have a Minotaur. So I would just take that on the stage, and I would get a similar sound. I'd be able to play it better because I'm playing it with a sequencer, and I could chuck it in my backpack and jump on the plane. So yeah. Let's see, would it be possible to email me or schedule time to talk to you off stream? Disabled electronic musician looking to stabilize his setup. Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way to reach out is go sign up for the Patreon. It's free. I actually set it up so that there's a free way to do that. Or if you want to be part of the Discord and the chat on there, you can't open up the Discord to free memberships. So I had to make a $1 version. So you can do that, and then you can just reach out to me through Discord, or you can message me here on YouTube, or you can reach out to me on Instagram, social media, whatever. Yeah, and happy to answer any questions that you have. And if it's something we can jump into quick. If you want to schedule sessions, I do one-on-one coaching as well, so we can do that. There's also a level in the Patreon if you want, where we're going to start doing. We actually started a couple weeks ago doing a weekly group coaching session where if you're part of that level, you get the code to come onto the group, and then Saturday mornings we all get together and you ask your questions, we chat live, we kind of go over stuff. I can show you things on the machines, like you can show me stuff on your stuff on the screen. You can learn from the other people's questions that are on the group chat as well. And yeah, so it's a lot of fun. So if you want to jump on and do that, that's all part of Patreon as well. So would love to have you on there. Cool. Well, I guess that's going to probably be it for today, unless there's any more questions. If you've got something else, you can chuck it in there really quick and I'll answer your question. Other than that, keep an eye out, because like I said, I'm going to be doing this a few times a week now. I think I'm going to do like 2 or 3 a week, just because now I've got some time and I've got my setup finalized, and I'm in here working a lot on stuff right now because I'm getting ready, like I said, for a whole bunch of shows and travel. I'm heading out to Berlin for Super Booth. I'll be there the 15th to the 21st, and then I'm going to Northern Europe. I think I've a gig. I'll let you guys know about this later on in Berlin. As soon as that gets finalized, I'll be doing a couple demos at Super Booth for Oxi, and also in the booth for Bux, the people that make the synthesizer books. I'm going to do a demo and a chat about how I perform live. And then I'll be playing a show in Brussels on the 24th of May, and then flying back to the States. And on the 27th, on Memorial Day, I'll be playing in Seattle at Monkey Loft with the Desert Hearts people. I guess they do this big event for Memorial Day every year. It's a multi-room, multi-stage thing, and with EasyBot and Modbang, we have an all-live hardware stage. So EasyBot will be playing. I'm playing can't remember who else is on there. Wet Paint, I think, a few other people. So yeah, it'll be really cool. So I have a lot of shows coming up. So because of that, I'm spending a lot of time in studio. I'm spending a lot of time going over stuff and setting up things and reconfiguring things. So I'll be plugging in the live stream so that you guys can follow along and ask questions and give me ideas and see what you want. It's not like the EasyBot streams where you can write music with me because my stuff's improvised, but we can work on the setup together and go over some improvisations, and you can tell me what you like and what you don't like. So one more question here. Have you thought about replacing the Octatrack with an Eventide H90? No. Not even a close comparison. The big difference is, yes, the H90 is a multi-effects unit, but with the Octatrack, you can build your own effects and you can customize them, not just adjusting parameters, but by putting them together and then being able to have 16 different immediately assignable presets so that I can have all of those on here where I can just go to this preset and then my crossfader works there. Then I can go to this one and it works there. It makes it super performative and amazingly powerful. So the H9 is cool, and it's sorry, H90. H9 also is cool, but the H90 it's not really built for what we're doing here, where the Octatrack is set up so that it can have these kind of individual scenes, performance scenes that are customizable. So yeah, let's see. Have you ever used OB6, OBX8? Yes, I have. They're cool, but I'm not a big, you hear with my music, I'm not a big polyphonic kind of pad kind of guy. And I think using that for, you know, monophonic bass lines is kind of overkill. So they sound great and they're amazing, but not really for the style that I do. Here in my studio, if you look around, like, everything here is a monosynth except I have the Polybrute. It's like my one polysynth, but everything else is a monosynth because I'm just way more into multiple monosynths rather than having one polyphonic voice. Let's see here. Thanks for this. Sure. Thank you guys for joining in. Join the Patreon. The Discord, you have to join the $1 version. The free one, Patreon doesn't let you link a Discord to a free version. So that's why I did the $1 one. And that gets you the chat in Patreon, and it gets you into the Discord chat. It links it automatically. So go ahead and check that one out. And in the meantime, check out Patreon for everything else. Join up if you want. If you want to join the level where we do the weekly group coaching sessions, it's $40 a month, and you get 4 group coaching sessions a month. So each one of them is $10, and you get a lot of stuff. Ask the people that have been in it recently. It's been cool, and we're hoping to get some more people involved, which would be great. And don't forget to check out the merch shop so you can get this. We've also got these, which I'm pretty excited about. If you see see like that, the new logo. And there's a black version too that has the logo embroidered on it, but tiny. Anyway, so yeah, there's some cool stuff in there. So go ahead and check that out. That's circlelive.com/shop. And yeah, and if you want to support the channel, you can do those things. You can use the affiliate links that are in the description down below the video. The Oxi One will get you 5% off if you buy directly from them, and it gets me a bit of an affiliate bonus as well. And yeah, well, thanks very much. I appreciate you guys joining in, appreciate the time, and I will see you, who knows, maybe tomorrow, we'll see. Thank you guys, and thanks for your patience at the beginning with the awful sound, and I'll edit that all out so that we can make it sound nice. So thanks very much, guys.